All right, so we got this article here, The Lost Generation by Jacob Savage. Now, this was bouncing around quite a bit about a month ago. I wanted to talk about it then, but so much stuff has happened. We got Renee Good, Minneapolis in general, the Venezuela. How many other things are there out there that I had to talk about that were happening? If I could find the time. Anyway, we'll go ahead and dive into this article here. Let's take a look and see what it has to say. So this is actually from December 15th, so it's a month and a half ago. This was in the news. For 15 years, I've scalped tickets to pay the bills, but in January 2016, I almost managed a real career. I was 31. I'd been in Los Angeles for 5 years writing scripts. There had been minor successes, a couple of small projects optioned, and I'd recently started writing with my best friend. We were writing constantly, making each other better, building momentum. Success felt close. Back then, it always did. I'd written a pilot script that a veteran showrunner had agreed in a very theoretical, very Hollywood sort of way to come on to. That project had fizzled, so we were surprised when an executive emailed us out of the blue to meet. The showrunner explained he'd submitted us for an upcoming writer's room he was going to run. The exec had loved our pilot and wanted to hire us. This was it, the moment our careers were supposed to take off. We'd put in our time. I'd been tutoring SATs and reselling tickets to make ends meet while I wrote. And 5 years seemed par for the course, based on the slightly older guys we knew who'd made it. But of course, by 2016, we were already too late. The showrunner emailed us back apologetically. I had initially thought I might be able to bring you guys on, he wrote, but in the end, it wasn't possible. We met with the executive anyway, a Gen X white guy who told us how much he loved our pilot, but the writer's room was small, he explained apologetically, and the high-level writers were all white men. They couldn't have an all-white male room. Maybe if the show got another season, they'd be able to bring us on. Of course, you can't have an all-white male room. How dare you? I mean, white men have never done anything for the population at large, have they? They just cause problems. That's all we ever do, right? Being white is okay. It's okay to be white. It's just freaking racism to the max. How dare we say that? So he concludes that thought with, they never did, saying that they never brought them on. The doors seemed closed to everywhere and all at once. In 2011, the year I moved to Los Angeles, white men were 48% of lower level TV writers. By 2024, they accounted for just 11.9%. The Atlantic's editorial staff went from 53% male and 89% white in 2013 to 36% male and 66% white in 2024. White men fell from 39% of tenure track positions in the humanities at Harvard in 2014 to 18% in 2023. Yeah, well, this is why everything is going to crap right now. And you can say that's racist to say that, but I mean, just look at the results. Where does all the best stuff come from, generally speaking? Europe. I'm not trying to make this a race thing. That's just the reality. Why? I don't know why. Maybe it's magic soil. I don't think it is, because we see an influx, a huge influx of non-whites into Europe right now, and they don't seem to be doing that great. No better than anybody else. So if it is that is the case, that white people are just lucky, then when we give every opportunity to non-whites, how come they're not outpacing whites? Sure, some do great. You got your Denzel Washingtons, your Will Smiths, your Oprahs. They do great economically. I can only name people who are famous because I don't know Joe Blow, high-power lawyer down the street who's making $1 million a year or $2 million a year doing these high-power cases. There was that guy that was he on the O.J. Simpson case who was a black guy, a black lawyer? I think there was a black lawyer on that case who defended O.J. But I don't know any non-famous black people who are killing it. Maybe you do. Maybe go down in the comments and tell me. And even if I tell you about the black guy I used to work with who outright owns a house in L.A., which is an impressive feat because owning a house in L.A. is expensive, you don't know that guy. You don't care about that guy. That guy is not impactful to you because we know that there are black people all over the world who are succeeding in one way or another. And there are black people all over the world who are failing in one way or another. So, in retrospect, 2014 was the hinge, the year DEI became institutionalized across American life. I don't know if he has any statistics to back that up. Maybe that was the year. I don't think it was. I think it was earlier than that, but whatever. In industry after industry, gatekeepers promised extra consideration to anyone who wasn't a white man. and then provided just that. With every announcement of promotions, there was a desire to put extra emphasis on gender or race. A former management consultant recalled, and when you don't fall into those groups, that message gets louder and louder and gains more and more emphasis. On the other hand, you want to celebrate people who have been at a disadvantage. On the other hand, you look and you say, wow, the world is not rooting for you. In fact, it's deliberately rooting against you. As the Trump administration takes a chainsaw to the diversity, equity, and inclusion apparatus, there's a tendency to portray DEI as a series of well-meaning but ineffectual HR modules. Undoubtedly, there has been ham-fisted DEI programming that is intrusive or even alienating. Explain whoever that person is. Their last name is Taylor in the New Yorker. But for the most part, it is a relatively benign practice meant to increase diversity while also sending a message that workplaces should be fair and open to everyone. This is one of the most harmful practices the world has ever seen. The idea that we need to eliminate white men from economics altogether. We are not allowed to have white men, period, having jobs, being captains of industry. This is what the push is for. White men developed everything that we have in this world today. You like being able to go to the grocery store and buy whatever it is you want to buy, food-wise? Do you like being able to go out to whatever restaurant you want to? Do you like having cars? Because all that will slowly decay and fall away if we decide white men aren't allowed to make any money anymore. This may be how Boomer and Gen X white men experience DEI, but for white male millennials, DEI wasn't a gentle rebalancing. It was a profound shift in how power and prestige were distributed. Yet practically none of the thousands of articles and think pieces about diversity have considered the issue by cohort. This isn't a story about all white men. It's a story about white male millennials in professional America, about those who stayed and who mostly stayed quiet. The same identity a decade apart meant entirely different professional fates. If you were 40 in 2014, born in 1974, beginning your career in the late 90s, you were already established. If you were 30 in 2014, you hit the wall. Well, some of us started late. I started late. And then I went into an industry that is highly competitive and difficult to get a job in. Show business in general is difficult to work in. So yeah, it does profoundly affect me. Like I haven't really tried to get a job, but I have looked, and there's not a lot out there right now as far as jobs in my industry are concerned. So what are you going to do? Because the mandates to diversify didn't fall on older white men who in many cases still wield enormous power, they landed on us. Media matters. It may be hard to remember now, but a decade ago, the prevailing critique of American journalism was that it was woefully lacking in gender and racial diversity. There had been hope that new media would be different, that the internet might bring in a wider range of voices, but by the mid-2010s, that optimism was waning. New media ventures like Vox, BuzzFeed, and Politico are trying to shake up the way people get their news and entertainment online, NPR reported in 2014. But critics say those newsrooms and leadership roles are overwhelmingly made of white men. The critics were mostly right. Gawker was still 57% male and 79% white. Vice was majority male and 70% white. At 5:38, Nate Silver complained about a gender gap so severe that only 15% of applicants were from women. That doesn't matter. Women don't need to be in the workforce. Women being in the workforce, to the extent that they are now, to the extent that they were 30 years ago, is what is causing the mating crisis, the loneliness epidemic, the marriage crisis, and the drop in birth rates across the country, across the world, the Western world especially. So stay home, women. Make babies like you're supposed to. This is not a mystery to me. It's not, there's no equivocation here. Just do what you're supposed to do. Biologically, everything is fine. It was into this world that Andrew arrived in 2015. He took a job at a prominent new media organization and was put on the general assignment desk, monitoring breaking news and cranking out overnight write-ups. It was rewarding, he told me, but if you can imagine working a full-time gig, nights, weekends, and then on top of that, trying to build up a beat on the side that could eventually propel you into something sustainable. It's always difficult. He enjoyed the work and developed a beat. There was still a general optimism in the air, especially around new media. I had very well regarded deep dives and occasionally scoops. He said I had credibility as somebody who had come from a more left-leaning perspective, was well sourced on the left, but was willing to give them a kick in the teeth every now and then. At the time, it felt really about holding power to account and giving new ideas a fair airing. The thing is these people don't realize they have power. What woman out there does not have power? Does not have any real power? I'll tell you which ones. The very old. That's it. Women who are way past their prime. They have no sway over men. Like in fact, this happened to me, I don't know, a year ago. A woman that I've seen around the gym plenty of times, but she came up to me and started chatting me up, and I was like, good for you. I mean, I'm in a relationship, so it wouldn't change anything if she was young, but you're like 60, not interested. So after college, before he moved into journalism, Andrew had worked in a nonprofit world. Ambient talk about diversity and power structures had been part of the general atmosphere, and he never much thought about it. In any progressive space, there was always at least some concern about representation, he explained. I did not see that in any way impeding my advancement for the first 6 or 7 years of my career. But that view became harder to sustain. In 2019, David Haskell, who had just been named editor-in-chief of New York Magazine, was asked to respond to staff disappointment that another white man had been elevated to the role. I understand that reaction. Part of me shares it, he told his staff. The most effective way to move the needle on diversity hiring is for a strong, loud commitment to come from the very top of the masthead. I plan to do exactly that. Great. So you're going to push for DEI instead of merit. And what did we talk about in my last video? Planes landing upside down because we have to have female pilots. Ridiculous. Garbage. I don't need to have a female pilot. You know, there's one place where I want a woman. One place for sure that hands down I want a woman, and that is in my bed. And this used to be the way things were. I went out and I earned the bacon, and you stayed home and were in my bed. So ridiculous. And I was foolish enough to believe in some of this stuff when I was younger. Not a whole lot. I mean, if somebody brought up the glass ceiling to me one time, and I was like, what are you talking about? Women make the same amount of money as men do. Women can be CEOs and stuff. Like, yeah, they can, but they're still not making it. And I was like, okay, well, that's something I don't know anything about, whatever. And then when all this started to hit the fan, after 2014, before 2014 even, because, I mean, when did I get into this space? It was like 2014 when I found Karen Strawn and opened my eyes to the reality of the world. So, yeah, it was 2014. It was, I want to say March 2014. So Andrew didn't work at New York, but he watched similar pressures reshape his newsroom. He had been there for 5 years, a beat reporter who couldn't seem to move up, and suddenly all anybody could talk about were diversity metrics. Management was, as he put it, obsessive about recruiting people of color, but the pool was small, and anyone promising was quickly poached by the New York Times or cable news. With all the declarations these newsrooms had been making, the imperatives, enough white guys already, seemed to me to be the mantra, he told me, and you couldn't help but wonder if that meant you were being passed up for opportunities, even in your own organization. Yeah, enough white guys already. The country is 70% white. It should be 96+% white, but they want to import people who aren't white. You notice that they're not going, oh, we need to bring in Eastern Europeans. They've suffered, they've struggled, they need to have a better life. Let's get some of those Eastern Europeans in here. No, when we bring in whites from South Africa, for example, there was a big uproar. How dare we bring whites in here? What's wrong with you? They want to bring in the non-whites, and this is part of the reason why. They want to show that non-whites can do it. They want to give non-whites a leg up to do it. But the thing is they just can't. You're not going to have a bunch of goat herders. You're not going to have a bunch of sugarcane farmers come in here and write top-notch articles that get put into New York. It's stupid. Institutions pursuing diversity decided that there would be no backlash. If a position was vacated by a woman or a person of color, the expectation was it would be filled by another woman or person of color. The hope was always that you were going to hire a diverse candidate. A senior hiring editor at a major outlet told me, if there was a black woman at the beginning of her career you wanted to hire, you could find someone. But if she was any good, you knew she would get accelerated to the New York Times or the Washington Post in short order. The truth is, after years of concerted effort, most news outlets had already reached and quietly surpassed gender parity. By 2019, the newsrooms of ProPublica, the Washington Post, and New York Times were majority female, as were new media upstarts Vice, Vox, BuzzFeed, and the Huffington Post. And then 2020 happened, and the wheels came off. In the aftermath of George Floyd's death, newsrooms tripped over themselves to stage a reckoning. The New York Times solemnly promised sweeping reforms on top of the sweeping reforms it had already promised. The Washington Post declared it would become the most diverse and inclusive newsroom in the country. CNN pledged a sustained commitment to race coverage, while Bon Appetit confessed that our mastheads have been far too white for far too long, and that the magazine had tokenized many BIPOC staffers and contributors. NPR went further still, declaring that diversity was nothing less than its North Star, of course. If you're tokenizing BIPOC, then what are they doing there? If I had my own business, I'm not going to bring on a person just to be like, hey, look, I got a black guy here. Hey, look, I got a Hispanic guy over there. Check it out, man. Look, I got an Asian woman over there. But she's hot, so, we're doing stuff behind the scenes. So that's why I got her. NPR is so full of crap. Yesterday, they had on the woman who was in charge of immigration, illegal immigration, whatever, something. She had to do some high position in Obama's administration, just talking out her ass. Like, the things that she was saying, that they were just not even remotely correct. And I'm like, this was a person who was in charge of this sort of stuff. This is what we get when we do this DEI stuff. And in addition to that, these people, they have an agenda. In addition to being terrible at your job, just because you're incompetent, but they have an agenda that they're trying to push. For a typical job, we'd get a couple hundred applicants, probably at least 80 from white guys. A couple hundred, and you're only getting 80 from white. So if you're getting 200 and you're getting 80 from white, 40% out of a country that's at least 60% white. Okay, so there you're already winning. Good job. But no, they don't see it that way. How dare we have 80 of them be from white guys? It was a given that we weren't going to hire the best person. It was jarring how we would talk about excluding white guys. The pipeline hadn't changed much. White men were still nearly half the applicants, but they were now filling closer to 10% of the open positions. That's high. That's high. How dare you? How dare you put 10% of your staff as white? How are we going to exterminate the white race if they give 10% of them jobs? It's just so ridiculous. They don't even know how to operate a genocide. Suddenly, in Andrew's newsroom, everything was driven by identity. There were endless diversity trainings, a racial climate assessment. At one point, reporters were told they had to catalog in minute detail the identity characteristics of all their sources. Andrew had been instrumental in forming the union at his company and objected when negotiations shifted from severance pay to parental leave to demands for racial quotas. They wanted to do like emergency hiring of black people, he said. When he questioned these new priorities, the response was swift. On a Zoom call, women would clap back at something I was saying, and other women would snap their fingers in the chat window. He recalled it was this whole subcultural language being introduced wholesale. Desperate for advancement, he had the same job, the same title for nearly 6 years. Andrew looked elsewhere. I applied for positions at The Atlantic, Politico, CNN, The Washington Post, 3 different desks at the New York Times, he told me. But newsrooms were contracting, which only made the competition more intense. When scarcity sets in, you start to worry about these things a little bit more, Andrew reflected. This was a business model problem that was exacerbated by the racial and gender preference problem. At The Atlantic, Andrew didn't even get an interview. Jeffrey Goldberg, the editor-in-chief, had described his hiring philosophy back in 2019. By opening up the possibilities of young people, women, and people of color, by imagining their rise in a deliberate way, I've just widened the pool of potential leadership. There's no quota system here. Goldberg was candid about another less comfortable reality. It's really, really hard to write 10,000-word cover story, he said in the same interview. There are not a lot of journalists in America who can do it. The journalists in America who do it are almost exclusively white males. I had to write 10,000-word essays in college and stuff. It's not that difficult. I don't know why this is hard. With or without quotas, the Atlantic succeeded in hiring fewer of these white males since 2020. Nearly 2/3 of the Atlantic's hires have been women, along with nearly 50% people of color in 2024. The Atlantic announced that 3/4 of editorial hires in the past year had been women and 69% people of color. How are you going to sustain this? The only way you can sustain this is if you get rid of the white people in the country. And the problem they're going to run into with this genocide that they're trying to implement here subtly is we have open markets. So unless you start limiting white people's ability to get loans, which I'm sure they want to do because they say, oh, black people used to not be able to get loans, they're always going to be able to open up a business. And even if you can eliminate their ability to get loans from a bank, there are people who want to invest in small businesses that they see promise in. They want to start small businesses that they see promise in. So, this is all going to fail long term. It's going to take them a lot longer than I think they think it will. It's not going to be in my lifetime that we're going to exterminate the white race. And I plan on living a long time still, so. The irony was where older white men remained in charge, especially where they remained in charge, there was almost no room to move up. If you hired a team of white guys around you, you were putting a target on your back, recalled the hiring editor. At the New York Times Magazine, one of the few prestige magazines with a public masthead, Jake Silverstein, a Gen X white man, served as editor-in-chief, and Bill Wasik, another Gen X white man, serves as editorial director. But of 9 millennial senior editors, the story editors below them, there's just one white guy, and he's been there since 2012, effectively grandfathered in. At the very bottom of the ladder, the picture is a little different. Since 2020, only 7.7% of Los Angeles Times interns have been white men. Between 2018 and 2024, of the roughly 30 summer interns each year at the Washington Post, just 2 or 3 were white men. In 2025, coincident with certain political shifts, the Post intern class had 7 white guys, numbers not seen since back in 2014. In 2018, the New York Times replaced its summer internship with a year-long fellowship. Just 10% of the nearly 220 fellows have been white men. Again, how are you doing this when the country is majority white? Are you bringing in foreigners? Are you literally bringing in people from other countries to do this? If you have an internship, that I could see that the person, they do it for school credit in most cases. I don't know what this fellowship is, so I don't know how that works. But yeah, they must be bringing in people from outside the country just for these jobs. I don't know. Other pipelines dried up as well. The alt weeklies that gave misfit young men their start have shed them entirely. There are no white men on the editorial staff at the Seattle Stranger or on the staff of Indie Week. As late as 2017, there were 6 white men atop the masthead for the Portland Mercury. By 2024, there was just one, the boomer editor-in-chief. It's a tragedy. By the early 2020s, many journalists I spoke to noticed something else. The young white men who once flooded internship and fellowship pools had simply stopped applying. Gen Z men had absorbed the message that journalism was not for them. Writing in general is not for them because you can't get published unless you're a woman or if you're a minority. You have to do self-publishing, which that can be really good, but a lot of times it's not. Most of the time it's not. The femaleness is striking. A well-known Gen X reporter with impeccable liberal bona fides confided, "It's like, wow, where have the guys gone?" In less than a decade, the entire face of the industry changed. The New York Times newsroom has gone from 57% male and 78% white in 2015 to 46% male and 66% white in 2024. Condé Nast today is just 35% male and 60% white. BuzzFeed, a media operation that had been 52% male and 75% white in 2014, was just 36% male and 52% white in 2023. But nothing explains the new media story quite like Vox, whose explainers dominated 2010's discourse and whose internal demographics captured the decade's professional shift. Back in 2013, when Ezra Klein came under fire for his startup's lack of diversity, Vox Media was 82% male and 88% white. By 2022, the company was just 37% male and 59% white. And by 2025, leadership was 73% female. The demographic shift reshaped not only who told the stories, but which stories got told. After George Floyd's death, Andrews College Lucas was assigned a piece about why you should never call the police I remember having to interview one of the abolitionists for a story about how if somebody breaks into your car or your home, it's white supremacy to call the cops. Even if you need it for an insurance report, Lucas told me, that's always made me feel gross. I think back on that with a lot of regret. Newsrooms were center-left places in 2005. The prominent Gen X reporter told me, now they're incredibly left places. I imagine one reason newsrooms have gotten more explicitly lefty is that you have white guys and white women adopting a kind of protective collaboration, allyship mindset to get through the door. That might be one of it, but I imagine that the real reason for this, of course, is to spread the message. It's much easier to spread the message if you find, a person who isn't white, because white people are more likely to go, yeah, that message about being against me, that's not going to work. And it's much more difficult to find a man who's going to say the same thing regarding being male. Andrew, for his part, was unable to adopt a performative allyship that had become expected. I always thought I was an effeminate nerd growing up, but my way of expressing myself now puts me on the most masculine end of men in media, he told me. I started to pick up on the fact that there wasn't much room for people who even speak in my timber. He was recruited for a senior reporter position at a more prestigious outlet, jumping through hoops every step of the way, as he told me, but by the end it felt like a cruel joke. Extensive interviews, writing tests, endless meetings with various editors, only to find out months later that the job had gone to someone a decade younger than me. A gay man of color who'd managed to go from intern to assistant editor to senior reporter in less than 2 years. If you're a white man, you gotta be a superstar, Andrew told me. You can't help feeling like no matter how good you are, you were born in the wrong year. As he saw it, the industry had its super successful white guys who'd made it before 2014, and so were functionally Gen X. But for everyone else, moving up in a contracting industry was nearly impossible. I was kind of grandfathered in during one era and had achieved a level going into 2015 through 2024 where it just didn't really affect me. One of the superstar journalists told me, after surviving years in buyouts, Andrew finally made senior reporter in 2023. But by then, it felt less like recognition than a consolation prize. He was coming up on 40, unmarried, with little room for forward or lateral movement. When the next round of buyouts hit, he decided it was time to leave. Yeah, I'm going to end it there because we're not anywhere near halfway through this article. Maybe a third of the way through this article. I'll leave a link down in the comments so you can find this and read through it if you want to. But we all know what's going on here. They're trying to erase the white race. They think that white people are evil. They think that men are evil. That's the woke agenda. White people are evil. Men are evil. Straights are evil. Thin people are evil. Anybody who is just a regular person, what we would say is a regular person in America. We can't say that anymore because the demographics have shifted so much. But that's how it used to be when I was young. I remember. Like I said, they just want to get rid of us, people like me. And we're going to see that happen more and more, or at least attempts to make that happen more and more as we go on through this. So you want to make a difference in this sort of thing, keep this from happening. If you're a white man, start your own business. Do what you can to make money so that you have something to propel yourself into the future. And how many people out there want to start their own business? It's hard work. It's hard to do. How many people out there are going to have the background that's going to allow them to start their own business? Very few. Somehow find a way of getting money. Somehow find a way of surviving, promoting yourself, because nobody else is going to do it for you. Basically, is what I'm saying. You can't even get a girlfriend now. You can't even get a wife now if you're a white man. It's super hard to do those things. At least here in California. I don't know what it's like in the rest of the country. I mean, it's more white than here. This state, California, is the least white state, I think, out of all the states. It's only 39% white. The last time I checked. So who knows, those demographics may have changed. Hopefully they'll change drastically when we get rid of all of the illegals. Anyway, that's all I got for this time. Thank you all for watching. I do appreciate it. Please remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe. I'll see you in the next video.